Are you planning on making a move to Maryland and you're wondering to yourself, what are the things that are important for me to know about living in this state? I completely understand what you're going through. I myself am a transplant to Maryland. I moved here in 2006, right after I graduated from college, and there were definitely a lot of things for me to learn moving from North Carolina to Maryland. In today's video, we're going to clear everything up, and I'm going to talk to you about at least 14 things that people don't tell you about moving to and living in Maryland. If you're new to my channel, welcome. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell for notifications if you want to be tuned in to everything about living, playing, working, and thriving in the Baltimore area. My name is Persia, and I'm a local real estate agent in Maryland, specifically working in Baltimore and its surrounding suburbs. And I've been doing this for about 4 years, and I absolutely love it. So whether you're looking to move in 9 days or 90 days, make sure to reach out to me, send me an email, give me a phone call, send me a text message. We can set up a Zoom call, and it would be my extreme pleasure to help you make a smooth move to Baltimore. Okay, one thing about Maryland that I didn't realize until I moved here is that it's a small state geographically, but it has one of the largest populations in the state. Okay, so it's the 42nd largest state in terms of its geography, but it has 6 million people. And so when you think about it, that just means that some places might feel crowded, congested, particularly urban areas. And you certainly can go to outside areas like Western Maryland, you can go to the Eastern Shore, some counties in Southern Maryland, and you certainly can get more wide open spaces. But a lot of the urban areas feel more congested simply because there's a lot of people. Now, one place where this congestion of people and where the population is really apparent is when it comes to traffic. Traffic can be obnoxious in Maryland, and it's not just the Baltimore metro region. I would say it's actually much worse in the DC suburbs. So Montgomery County, Prince George's County, where you have the 295 and 495 corridors, are going to have major congestion. And so I think that that's something that you have to prepare yourself for. A lot of times when I am preparing to travel on those roads, whether I'm just visiting DC temporarily, whether I'm going home to North Carolina to visit and I'm planning on using 95 South or 295 to go to those places, I tend to leave at hours that are off-peak hours, because if I do not, I'm going to be stuck in traffic for hours, and traffic that's not just stop and go, traffic that can be at a standstill. So when I travel by road, I like to go at, like, I know it sounds crazy, but like 2 in the morning when there's nobody on the road. But because people commute in and out of DC, people, commute because they live outside of DC, even though they work there tends to be traffic, and especially around rush hour. So please keep in mind that if you are traveling in the Maryland area, specifically in the DC suburbs, give yourself some time and put on a nice music or audiobook so that you're not stressed out during that bumper to bumper drive. Another thing to take into consideration when you're driving in Maryland is the Easy Pass. And I am ashamed to say that I just maybe a year ago actually got an Easy Pass. I was paying those tolls every single time, and they're actually more expensive. I think it's $6 if you don't have an Easy Pass, and they're $3 if you do. So I'm finally saving that cash. But an Easy Pass is a really important thing if you're traveling anywhere in Maryland, because there aren't toll booths anymore. And so, they're doing the electronic monitoring of your vehicle when you go through these throughways, and making sure that you have an Easy Pass is the best way to avoid fines and to pay less money for traveling on those roads. Another thing about Maryland that they don't necessarily tell you is that Maryland has really unpredictable weather, particularly in late summer, early fall, and like the spring times. You just really never know what you're gonna get. You think that you're gonna have predictable weather, or you know what's going on, and it always changes. I think that probably now that can apply to many areas just because of global warming and everything that's going on in the world with the environment, but I find it particularly true in Baltimore. And another thing about Maryland is that summers are really hot and humid. And so we're in the mid-Atlantic, we're not in the South. I'm from the South where it's very typical to have hot and humid summers, but they also have that here in Maryland. So just be prepared for that. Don't think you're living in kind of more of a northern climate where it doesn't get too hot and humid, because you will be disappointed. Another thing about Maryland is one of the most, if not the most expensive state in the United States to live, just as a state as a whole. Obviously, California is an expensive place to live, New York is an expensive place to live, but Maryland is too. And so that's really important to know. It actually was rated the jurisdiction that has the highest tax burden. I think we have the 12th highest tax burden in the nation. So that's really important to know, that personal taxes, income taxes, property taxes are all going to be higher in the state of Maryland than in other jurisdictions. Now, even though Maryland is an expensive state to live in, the economy here is thriving. There are a lot of businesses, there are a lot of industries, there are a lot of universities, there are a lot of places that bring in work and jobs for people. So yes, we have one of the highest cost of living, and it is an expensive state to live, but living here gives you a lot of opportunities when it comes to work and jobs and income. So know also that if you are living and working in the DC suburbs, you're gonna probably make a higher income, but also pay more than if you're living in the Baltimore suburbs, where the cost of living is a little bit lower. So there is some diversity when it comes to the amount of wealth and the amount of money that people make, and also when it comes to cost of living. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind, that Maryland is not just really homogeneous. It has a lot of different diverse areas and things that aren't all the same. So what you experience in the DC suburbs is going to be different than what you experience in the Baltimore suburbs. It's going to be different on the Eastern Shore. It's going to be different in Western Maryland. So you kind of have to do your research on the different areas and where you're moving to, so that you can kind of know cost of living and information that's specific to the jurisdiction in Maryland where you'll be living, because there is so much diversity here. Piggybacking on the topic of diversity, there's not just diversity in terms of cost of living and income and jobs. There's diversity when it comes to geography here in Maryland, which is one of my favorite things about the state. You have the mountains to the west, you have easy access to the beach like Ocean City in the east, you have coastal towns, you have suburbs, you have urban areas, and so the geographic diversity is pretty amazing, and there's a little bit of something for everybody depending on how you like to spend your time. There's also a lot of political diversity in Maryland, which was interesting to me when I first moved here. The political diversity, I'll have to say, I know that Maryland normally is a Democratic state. Like if you look historically, it has voted Democratic, I think, in majority of elections, but we have had a Republican governor. There are more sort of urban areas and cities that are more progressive, but then there are also more rural areas that have, you know, the other side of the spectrum and more conservative areas. So I think what's important is that there is diversity of political thought, there's diversity of geography, there's diversity when it comes to culture and race. And so I really love that about Maryland. Not everybody is the same, not everybody thinks the same way, not everyone, you know, wants the same things, but it creates an environment in which you can learn from others, and I really enjoy the fact that there's so much variety and diversity of thought here in this state. Okay, this is definitely one thing that nobody told me about living in Maryland when I first moved here, and it is that alcoholic products are only sold in liquor stores. And I had no idea. I remember the first time that I moved here from North Carolina, I went to a grocery store and I actually asked one of the workers in the store where the beer and wine section was, because I was so used to just buying beer and wine in a grocery store, and I was flabbergasted that you have to go to a different store to get beer and wine. But that's the case. Don't make the same mistake that I did if you're coming from a state like North Carolina, where it's very common just to buy your beer and wine in the grocery store. It's a little different here in Maryland, so you'll have to get used to that. Okay, something about Maryland that's really important to know are that crabs are a way of life. I feel like crabs, picking crabs, eating crabs, getting together for crabs is just a pinnacle peak experience. It's a vibe that you need to know about. And it's definitely worth it. I know some people, even Marylanders, the rare Marylander does not like to pick crabs, but I've gotten into it. I think they're delicious. It's worth spending the time on, in my opinion. And so just know that it's a way of life. Another thing about crabs is they are very, very pricey. So if you come to Maryland and someone invites you over to their house for crabs or invites you to a crab feast, please know that that means a lot. That means that they think very highly of you, because crabs are not just something that you do on a spur of the moment. Usually people pitch in for them. They cost a lot of money. They're a really big deal. So if you get invited to someone's crab party or crab feast, you're on the sweet spot. Along with crabs goes Old Bay. Okay, and Old Bay is a condiment that you would think would only go on crabs and seafood, but in Maryland it goes on everything. You can get Old Bay on your French fries, you can get Old Bay in your soup, you can get Old Bay, I mean, it's just like a table condiment, just like salt and pepper. That's how common it is here in Maryland. And I really like Old Bay, so that's fine with me. I've even seen, weird enough, Old Bay ice cream, which is strange, but people take their love of Old Bay to extremes, so that's something to know for sure about living in Maryland. Another thing that took me some time to understand is that not everybody in Maryland is a Ravens fan or an Orioles fan. No, just because you live in Maryland doesn't mean that those are your two sports teams, because there are other sports teams. If you're living in the DC suburbs, it's going to be more likely, even though you're from Maryland, that you are going with the Washington teams. So don't make the mistake of thinking that everybody's an Orioles fan or everybody's a Ravens fan, because you'll be mistaken. One thing I really found interesting when I moved to Maryland was how much Marylanders love their state flag. Like, the state flag is everywhere. People wear it on their clothing, people have it on their cars, people have it, they wear hats, like it's a thing. And it's not something that I was used to, so that's definitely something. There's a lot of pride when it comes to the Maryland flag, and I would say the Maryland flag is probably one of the most recognizable items or flags, state flags. Everybody knows what the Maryland flag looks like, so I think that that's really interesting. There's a lot of Maryland pride in that flag. So I know it's the middle of the winter and we're not really thinking about cool, cold treats, but snowballs are also an important Maryland item that were new to me. Snowballs are basically snow cones, which is what we would call them in North Carolina, but it's shaved ice with syrup on it. But snowballs are such a popular item here, especially in the summertime. I live in Hamilton. There's a really popular snowball stand right around the corner from my house, and you'll see them just dotted everywhere. You'll also see people just posted up with snowball stands in their front yards. They just will buy the syrups and buy the ice machine, you know, have people come to their front yard and get a snowball. So I thought that that was really interesting. They're definitely much more of a phenomenon here in Maryland than they ever were in North Carolina. Well, there you have it. Things that nobody tells you about living in Maryland. I hope that you found this video educational. Certainly, I have really enjoyed living in Maryland. I am still here, not planning on going anywhere. So if you are thinking about making the move to Maryland, or if you're planning a move to Maryland and you're needing some help making that transition a smooth one, finding neighborhoods, finding information about making that transition, please reach out to me. You can give me a call, send me a text, shoot me an email, and it would be my absolute pleasure to help you make the move to Maryland. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.